from The Real Real. We're going to dig deep on zero-touch provisioning and implementation. So without further ado, give us a round of applause for Sean, Kat, and Richard. I'm old school, ladies first. This is how it works.
Such gentlemen, thank you so much.
We try. Don't let that fool you, though. I'm not really doing it. Anyway, hi.
Hi.
How is it? So I'm Sean Rabbit. You may have seen me on such major motion pictures as Jam Connect the musical, Jam Connect the TV show, Jam Connect the animated series, and you're probably tired of listening to me talk about this stuff for the last 3 years, and that's Kat keeps bringing me back up here, which is great, and I love that. So let's tell them why we started this whole thing.
Yeah, let's do it. So thanks first and foremost for being here. It's just so amazing to be in a room with all of you. Again, virtual's been nice, but this is much nicer. So thanks for being here. Israel introduced us, so we're just gonna move right along. So kind of why we're here, where we are. Earlier, I think a couple of you looks like we're in Sean and I's session on zero trust starts with zero touch, and kind of why we're here is there's just been a lot in these last few years with disruptions as far as COVID goes, being outside the four walls of our organization, and we felt it was really important to kind of bring this all in. So if you were at that session earlier, I think, show of hands, a couple of you,
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. This is kind of a continuation.
Are you happy about that?
Well, Sean told me to talk nerdy to him, I guess.
I prefer keeping my job, so I'm going to say the comment out there. HR, I didn't say anything. You saw the recording. Anyway, let's skip on into this because a real important person needs to talk next. And the trick here is that if you've ever been or seen any of the JNUC presentations before on Jam Connect and releasing Zero Touch, you've seen me go off and say, here's how you do it, da-da-da. Well, if you want to see that again, you don't want to see it right now. Watch this video, read this blog. If you have ever seen anything that's ever been done for a demo video of Jam Connect, this blog will go into painful levels of detail. You can always tell how ticked off at something I am by how much I write down out into the instructions. This tells you literally everything and every step that we did in order to make those videos. Now the nice thing is, it's production ready. You can use it in your environment with no problems. That being said, here's someone who's smarter than me that's actually done it in production. So enough of the theoretical, talk to this guy.
So right before I hand this over to you, I really just want to do a quick kind of gauge of everyone. So who is already, actually who's on-prem right now as far as things go? Perfect. Who is already everything's in the cloud? Awesome. Who's got a mix of both? Who's got a little hybrid? Nice, awesome.
You two again.
They're back. Perfect. Well, Sean and I thought, we do a lot of sessions together around identity and to help everyone as best we can, but we work for Jamf, and we want you to hear it from someone who doesn't work from Jamf and who has been successful with the practices that Sean and I talked to you about. So without further ado, we are going to go away, and Richard, it's yours. We'll be back later.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Awesome. So, Israel, sorry, I'm Richard Purves. Don't let the spelling fool you. I blame my parents. Sorry. And I'm the senior macOS engineer for The Real Real. It should also be pointed out I'm the only macOS engineer for The Real Real. So, a little bit about myself. Like Sean, I have done a few talks in the distant past, but this is the first one since 2017, so it's good to be back. Pleased to say that don't let the accent fool you, I'm a US permanent resident since December 2019. This does become relevant later. I've worked in a few different fields. I've worked media and education, and now I work for the real, which is retail. You can find me on Slack and on Jav Nation. Not on Jav Nation as much anymore, but I am still around. Using Fountain, so you can find me around there and send me messages, and I'll try my best not to get overloaded. And more importantly is, IT is not the only thing I do. I'm still doing some interesting things outside. So, anyway, about the real. So some of you have asked who I work for and then wondered who I work for. So the short version is we are a marketplace for authenticated luxury consignment. If you have last year's Gucci bag and you don't want it anymore, you can consign it through us. We will then authenticate it. We will then put it on sale for you. And then, you get some money to put to your next bag, and then we take a cut off the top. So we have online presence. We have 3 warehouses. We also have a number of brick and mortar stores, so you don't necessarily have to have an account. You can walk into one of our stores and buy what you want. And the picture that we've got up there is actually one of our retail stores in Greenwich, Connecticut. The mission of the company is we want to encourage the circular economy. We want to encourage reuse rather than just disposal. All good? Thank you. I turned my phone off, it's fine. And the cool thing about the company I work for is not only are we about 90% cloud, but we are 70-30 in favor of Apple. So we have Macs all over the place. Macs are our preferred platform. We have a lot of iOS. We have a lot of iPhones. So, a little bit of story time, a little bit of background to set everything up. So, I joined TRR in March 2020. Well, that was right before COVID landed. I really couldn't have got that timing any better if I tried. So, I was given a Mac laptop, and during my induction, and the thing that I always do whenever I start new companies is I'm always making mental notes of what's going on, what I'm seeing, and going from there. And immediately I'm realizing that this laptop has not been put through a management system. It's actually been built by hand. It was enrolled in Jamf, but Jamf itself had no policies. It has a few self-service ones. It had no configuration profiles. The machine was bound to Active Directory. My user account was present, and I was given a post-it note with my password on. And the machine's got live credentials that work, so that means somebody has seen my password and logged into this machine, and it wasn't attached to any corporate Wi-Fi by default. And I had to do that. And my reaction was, that. Thank you, Nick Cage. He will come back. So after I got over my initial disbelief, I now need to fix all the things. And I now need to do it quickly. And is Ben Toms in the room? No, he isn't. Oh well, never mind, I get to embarrass him. So thank you, Ben. For us from previous conferences, yeah, we've got to get on with this. We've got to fix all the things, and we can't pause, we can't faff around. But the important thing to remember for what I said at the beginning is, I'm the sole senior Mac guy. Lots of guys in support, lots of guys in the help desk, lots of other people in the different departments, but all the Mac stuff is my responsibility. So I have to remember that my employer is not IBM. I have to throw what resources I have at the problem, not a vast amount of resources. So what's the first thing you do? And the simple answer is, you drop some design goals. It's handy to know what you're going to do. So the first task I was given is, you've got to get rid of Active Directory and you've got to replace it with Okta Authentication and MFA. And in that regard, I was quite lucky because they'd already bought Jamf Connect licenses. So this is the point where I go, right, okay, first user who's going to log into the machine is going to determine how that machine is set up. We want our deployment changes, because we will need to make changes going on, and we want that to be easy. And what I mean by that is, we want to offload as much of this stuff into Jamf as possible. We don't want to be rebuilding packages all the time with everything that we have to do to get DEP to work. We want almost the same process, oddly enough, for automated device enrollment, as well as user-initiated enrollment. I will go into detail on that. I also need to be able to retrofit all of our existing devices and bring them to the same standard as a new build, or as close as possible. And the last thing is, I also need to improve the Wi-Fi onboarding experience. So, moving on from that, I'm here to tell you that everything is possible with Jamf Pro, Jamf Connect, Det Notify, and a little bit of Z Shell. And when I say a little bit, I do actually mean a fair amount. So, then the next thing is, okay, we now need to work out how we're going to do deployment. So I came up with this, and it's called I call it the deployment pyramid. You start at the bottom, you work your way to the top. The stuff at the bottom is the most used to all the least used. So we start off with our software and policies that go to absolutely everyone. So we have a common baseline for for the Mac platform across the entire company. Then the next thing we do is we go to the department-specific stuff. The people who need software in IT, that software does not need to go to our photo retouching department. Our photo retouching software does not need to go to IT. And every combination in between. Above that, we've got the operating system and CPU architecture-specific stuff. So you don't want to be trying to install Rosetta on an Intel machine. But at the same time, I don't want to support too many OSs, so I made the decision quite some time ago that the latest version is what we go for. We basically follow the SAP model, or we try to as best we can. In practice, I have a little bit of N-1 support, but not really. And then finally, on top of all of that, self-service. Empower your users. Put the least used stuff in self-service. Put all the apps in there. Easy. So, with that in mind, what I'm now going to show you next is the onboarding video we now give to new starters. So now you can see the entire process for yourself. Please, Arena, take it away.
Welcome to your new Mac. Now here's how to log in. First, we have to connect to the internet. So on the upper right corner, click on the Wi-Fi symbol. If you're signing in from outside the company or from home, find that network and sign in. If you're signing in from within the company, please use the TRR deploy network and enter the password as shown. For the username, enter your first last name, and for the password, enter that temporary password located in your welcome letter. It is case sensitive, so make sure you copy it exactly. Don't worry, this is only temporary. Now when the Okta login window appears, your email should automatically be filled out, and you just need to enter the temporary password under password. Check the Remember Me box and hit sign in. You'll see the prompt to configure your multi-factor authentication, so hit configure factor and enter the phone number you want the code to go to. As an option, you can set up Okta Verify or Google Authenticator in addition, but it's not necessary. Then hit finish when you're done. And here is where you're going to set up your password. So enter the temporary password, which was that password from the welcome letter. And for your new password, make sure it's 15 characters, there's no parts of your name within the password, and contains a special character. Now Okta will launch, hit done, and sign into the computer using your first last name and your new password you just made. You'll need to verify again. And now your account is being created on the Mac. Once it's done, you'll see the accessibility window. If you have any physical impairments, you can go ahead and fill this out, or otherwise just hit Not Now. To make your life easy, you may want to set up Touch ID now, or you can set it up later. Go ahead and choose your look. We're going to choose Auto, hit Continue, and watch the magic happen. Now this may take a while, which is why we're just fast forwarding. Now that that's done, let's set up the Wi-Fi. If you're setting up from home, choose your home Wi-Fi. If you're setting up from within the company, please choose the TRR network and sign in using your credentials. Ask your manager if you need help with this part. Once you're all connected, you'll see a prompt saying Mac deployment completed. And there's just one more thing we need to do. Click on Open System Preferences, check off the box by Google Chrome and the Remote Support Customer Client. Click Later, go to Input Monitoring, check the same apps again, and hit Quit and Reopen. Now your Mac is all set up.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to see when that works. I want to claim the record for the world's fastest Touch ID enroll. That video's not sped up at all, honestly? No. Okay, how do we do this? Well, let's start off with automated device enrollment, and specifically we'll start off with the Jamf Pro pre-stage. So here's our Jamf Pro pre-stage. We've got it set to create a local administrator account by default. I've blanked out the username for obvious reasons, and we set a known password at this point. But then a bit further down at the bottom, we say skip user account creation. And as you've just seen, that's because Jamf Connect is going to create that account for us based on somebody's authenticated Okta credentials. Moving on from there, we get to the configuration profiles. This bit's quite important. We want the Jamf Connect preferences, and we want the Jamf Connect license key in there. I have the Jamf Connect license key separate from the main preferences, so I'm not re-pushing preferences every time I update our license. What's really important to note here is the scoping. We've got these set to all computers, all users. And this is very, very important for DEP pre-stage. Some of you may have encountered this and not quite realize what's going on. And what basically happens is these profiles are pushed from your Jamf Pro server before enrollment takes place. What happens next is the enrollment package comes down, it enrolls the machine. As part of that work, it will do an inventory on that machine. And if you have any scoping on those profiles, Jamf Pro will immediately grab and yank them off your computer. And then when the recon's finished, it'll go, oh, these should be on this computer, they're not there, and will then put them back. By setting these things to all computers, all users, they never get removed. So the situation that we had was, occasionally, people would get to the Jamf Connect login screen and it would have no configuration, because at the moment it loaded, there was no config for it to read for, but then the config came back, which is why reboots were fixing it. So if you do it that way, it never goes away. The next thing is the enrollment packages. Since we're cloud-based, I have a debt notify package and I have a Jamf Connect package. I like to keep them separate. The other important thing is make sure the distribution point is set to cloud distribution point Jamf Cloud, because when this thing is blank, that distribution point is set to none, and if you don't change that, it all fails and you're left wondering why. But this is where you get very, very good on M1s at doing DFU mode root. So, that covers automated device enrollment. What about user-initiated? Now, thankfully, we don't have too many user-initiated devices, but we still have some. So, our IT techs do this. So, you take a non-ADE enrolled Mac, because we have some of the older ones that you can't put in with Apple Configurator for iOS. And they go through the setup assistant and they create our local admin account. They then use Jamf user-initiated enrollment webpage to enroll the computer. The Mac will download the two packages that you just saw. It will automatically restart. It ends up at the Jamf Connect login window. You turn it off and you hand it to the user. A little bit more involved, but it's simple. Here's the policies on how this works. And I take advantage of the fact that in Jamf Pro, policies execute in alphabetical order. So I append numbers to the front to control which order I want things to run. I also have my policy names in plain English so that somebody coming in later on can actually know what the heck it's doing. So the first one is the Jamf Connect package. This is the same Jamf Connect package that was in DEP. The second policy, debt notify. And there's all the Jamf restart stuff immediately at the end. Now, I want to bring to your attention policy scoping. I've got this set to a smart group called all managed devices. So I can mark devices as unmanaged and then it won't go through this. But the exclusion policy, the exclusion criteria is the more interesting one. And that is a smart group called config deployment started. And we exclude every machine that has already begun this process. Why do we do this? There are occasions where you may need to re-enroll a machine. And you may need to enroll it through user-initiated enrollment, or you may do it through the MDM method that Jamf Pro organizes through the API. if you have a check in there to make sure that these machines that have already been through your deploy build process on the enrollment complete trigger are not in scope because they've already done it, if you re-enroll the machine, you don't force people to go through the entire redeployment sequence. Simple trick. So, our goal was to have one install package to rule them all, and we managed it. Inside that package, we can control the order in which items in Jamf Connect are installed. The stuff that I'm about to show you has got some blacked out areas. Those are things proprietary to the company I can't actually disclose. It's to deal with things like training room machines. This is also the reason why I have my own update mechanism. I don't use the stuff that's built into Jamf Pro. I basically can't. I also include some corporate branding at this point. So as you saw in the video, you know, the TRL logo was there. That's where it is. So it means that if our marketing department ever wants us to update the corporate branding, I tie it in with a Jamf Connect update. And then I get 2 birds in 1 stone. So let's have a look inside the Jamf Connect package. Big props to the guy who writes Suspicious package. I love that software. So all I'm doing is I'm taking the Jamf Connect package and the Jamf Connect launch agent, and I'm putting them in private TMP. And then in a separate folder, I've got my corporate branding. Pretty simple. In the post install, apologize for the bits that are blacked out. A lot of the stuff doesn't actually exist anymore, thankfully. There's 2 commands to, first of all, install Jamf Connect first, and then install the launch agent. We also have some cleanup code that runs afterwards so that I'm not clogging up private temp until the next time the machine restarts. Being tidy is just a good thing. So, that's Jamf Connect. That's the simple version of Jamf Connect. Let's move on to Dev Notify. So again, I want one installer to rule them all, and because I'm getting rid of AD in the darkness, not AD back then. You have no idea how happy I was when they said we don't want AD anymore. So, it's designed to start the deployment process on the first user login only. We again want as much configuration in Jamf Pro and the Jamf Pro GUI as possible. I want to do minimal changes to the script package as possible, and I want to minimize user interaction with the process. I don't want people typing stuff in because people get it wrong. People make mistakes. I should know, I'm one of them. So again, in that package, you can see that we throw Dev Notify in place. We throw a launch daemon in place to activate the entire thing. I've got some deployment images that you saw during the video, and I've got the Dev Notify script. Pretty simple. Come on, button. There we go. So here's my post-install script. This is part of the package. And what I've got in here is some stuff for an edge case that I found where occasionally I deploy the stuff through DEP and it's got the quarantine, the com.apple.quarantine attributes set all over the files. And I still have no idea why. But it hasn't reoccurred since I forced to remove it off all the files. This is hack work, but it works. The next thing I do is on line 14, I look for a user. I look to see if someone is logged in or not. During DEP, you are not logged in. During UIE, you are. And what I'm doing here is going, okay, if it says login window or _MB setup user or blank, start the bootstrap, the launch daemon that you saw earlier. And yes, those are the new commands to get it to work. It doesn't do that for user-initiated enrollment, otherwise it starts popping up right as it tries to restart the machine. So we just ignore it if there's somebody actually logged in, because it will take effect on next restart. The Dev Notify script itself, anyone who's been on the Mac admin Slack and in the Dev Notify channel and other places will know that I actually have a fairly custom Dev Notify script that has been used by some other people at this conference. So let's go through some of the more relevant parts of it. So we're going to start off with the caffeinate command to caffeinate the Mac, because the enrollment process on some of the larger builds can take so long the machine will go to sleep. So that's another trick. We also grab the PID number so that we can kill caffeinate right at the end. Otherwise, the machine will never go to sleep when you want it to. The next section is we wait for enrollment to complete, so we check for the presence of the com.jamf software task1 plist. That is your check-in plist. We've got a while loop in there that loops every 0.1 of a second, looking for that file to appear. Because occasionally on slower network connections, that file will not immediately appear. But in this case, it usually does. And then once that file does exist, we hit it with a launch CTL boot out to disable it. We don't want check-in running during this process, or rather, we want check-in running when we want it to. Next thing is, we're running this as a launch daemon. That launch daemon took effect immediately. How do we know when to start this process when the user logs in? And the most reliable way is to actually look for the doc process loading. Because if you're outside the login environment, and you're in the login window, the doc process doesn't exist. When someone logs in and the doc comes up, this will then catch it and then allow you to proceed on. You know somebody's logged in at this point, which means that the next bit of code where we work out what the username is and then what the user ID is will then work. So if you leave these things on the Jamf Connect window, it's sat and spinning on that particular loop until somebody actually logs in. Now, again, we're loading the script as a launch daemon. We need the launch daemon so that we can do things with the Jamf binary, because the Jamf binary needs to be root to function. However, launch daemons have no GUI access. That's been true since 10.4. So what we do is we have a line to work out where dep-notify is, because Lord only knows I was moving it around between applications and applications utilities and broke things many times. And then we do a launch CTL as user to then load it as the current logged in user. Problem solved. Launch it with -jamf so it reads out the log file. Launch it as full screen so people can't mess with it. And then use the ampersand to put it in the background, because otherwise the script will just stick there. Another little check to see if the Jamf binary is in place. You see, there's more checking in this than there is actual work. And it's just to make it reliable. And you know what? You want it to be slower and more reliable than quick and then fail half the time. Another check using check JSS connection to see if we do actually have a connection to the Jamf system. You should at this point, but it doesn't hurt to be sure. And then, I apologize for how small this next slide is, so let me go through this. So, the top section is kill any check-in in process. So even though we unloaded the launch daemon earlier, just in case there's any background processes going, we do a check to see if Jamf policy -random delay seconds is going. And if it is, we just kill it, because it ain't coming back at that point. Then we get to the meat and potatoes of what dep-notify actually does. So we've already had the bit where we set up the initial screen. The first section of code there in the middle is the bit where it says, I'm going to grab the user details. And that's where it runs a script to grab the username, the email address of the current user on that system and put it into the Jamf inventory. We'll get into more detail on how that goes in a minute. And then the second one is the automatic device naming. And this is a proprietary script that talks to our asset management service, uses the device serial number to look up the asset tag information and then puts that in the hosting. So we have records of who has the device, and we also have a correct name on the device at this point. And then the next section is, a lot of people who do notify like to have lots and lots of custom triggers, you know, like Adobe Acrobat, Google Chrome, and so on and so forth. And I don't believe in that, because the minute you change any of your software, you've now got to change your script. Well, I have one trigger, and it's called deploy, and I have one trigger to rule them all. We'll get onto the scoping of how that works again in also just a second. And because none of my deploy policies have a recon on them, because I don't want to be hammering the Jamf server while I do a deployment, we put a single recon in at the end. So it'll access and run 10, 20, maybe even 30 in worst case scenario policies to install software. but there's only one recon. And then finally, right at the end, we re-enable check-in. And let check-in do its thing, because I also have policies on check-in that I didn't want to run before deployment worked. So, how do we get the information for the user and put it into Jamf? And the simple answer is, in the user's library preference file, there is com.connect.state.plist. And in that file, come on, there we go. Gotta love technology. There is a key called display name. And from our Okta environment, you get the full email address of the user. All you need is a script to read that out and then put it into the Jamf inventory record for that machine. After you've done that, you run a recon, and in our particular case, because we're an Okta customer, we run a recon on the machine. That then does an LDAP-S lookup with that email address against Okta, and then populates up all the details. From those details, everything else flows. So, when you first put a machine into Jamf through ADE, you get a stub record that's called dep-serial number of the machine, and then the rest of the inventory record is completely empty. During the inventory process, that populates up. So by the time that we've put our information in there and it's run all of these recons and done all of that kind of stuff, we end up with this. And that's a machine with a proper name. It's got my details in there in the user and location. You can see it's got my name, it's got my email address, it's got my position, it's got my department, it's got my building, and it's got some stuff I can't share in the room folder, because that isn't actually a room folder. And from that, we can scope all of our policies. You can scope by department, you can scope by the building, and you can scope by anything else that we've got in there. So we grab the user email, we put that information into Jamf, we can scope everything off that. We can have true individual or department configuration based on all of this information. And the best bit is, we've got more accurate information than our asset tracking software. So let's have a look at some of these deploy policies. And this is the example of what some of them are like. So you notice we've got configure computer with auto name right at the very top, all managed devices. We've got deploy Apple Silicon, Rosetta, which is only scoped at Apple Silicon devices. Nice little smart group for that. We've got other bits of software that go to everybody. We've got Slack there that only goes to 7 different departments. Don't ask me why. And then, of course, once again, right at the very bottom, doc configuration. And we do it last. And we make sure all the software's on first. And with that, Kat, if you'd like to rejoin me on stage.
Awesome. Thank you so much for showing us that. So we wanted to just kind of take some time to basically understand that I think we're going to have quite a few questions for you.
And if we run out of time, I will be available immediately afterwards as well.
So we appreciate you sharing as much as you could. Like Sean and I said, we talk a lot about in theory, you put it all into practice in a real life environment. One question that I know we had, what was the biggest obstacle you ran into in your environment?
Well, one of the biggest ones, there we go, is our corporate Wi-Fi. This is actually no longer true, but it was when I did these slides. So our corporate Wi-Fi, as you saw at the end of the video, is username and pass 802.1x. And what we found is people couldn't use that at the Jamf Connect window to connect to Wi-Fi. So, you know, it'll detect it, you'll put in your username and password, and it does nothing. And I trace that back to the fact that the slide says self-assigned certs, but in reality what it really is we don't have a public cert on the radio server itself. So the device, so the Mac itself doesn't actually trust it. And because we're in the login window, there's no key chain to store any kind of trust information. So, yeah.
Okay, well, so you're using Jamf Connect, you're using Okta. Anything specific you discovered?
So yeah, we put in a deployment Wi-Fi network, and it's just a standard 802.1x network with a lot of URL filtering so that people can't just use this thing, but it's externally facing. It's got no access to internal corporate systems, so we just give the password that out to new users, and they build their machines on it. And on the basis of that, that was Nick Cage's reaction. But we had some other things.
Okay.
I mean,
Perfect. So, obviously, something you've heard of themes throughout the pandemic brought so many changes in the last couple of years. I'm sure so many of us obviously can relate. We were all in the office one day, next we're at home. For Jamf, it went pretty smoothly. We, had been kind of set up for that. We had a lot of remote workers already. I was actually one of them, so I've just been at home forever. But did drop shipping work for you all in the work from home environment? Did that bring any new challenges to your workflow?
So there's a couple of challenges, yeah. And the first one being, you saw at the start of the video that newly onboarded users only have an Okta temporary password to begin with. So it's like, how do you get someone who is remote to go through the process of changing their temporary password to an actual password that only they know? And the solution ends up for that one being, well, first of all, I spent a lot of time reading the Jamf Connect admin guide online. And then you discover that there is this key called help URL. And all you do is in that help key, because that's normally the little question mark button in the corner, you put the URL of your Okta instance in there. So when it gets to the point where they put in their temporary password and asks for stuff, that's why that window pops up, because it's automatically throwing up the help window at that point. I wish I could claim credit for that trick. It was somebody else on the Slack, but thank you very much. And there was one other thing.
Perfect. So when the first slide you showed, everything was being done manually. How much time do you think you saved your team and IT for the onboarding?
The IT technicians went in the worst case scenario, which is some of our photo retouching devices. They went from spending 2 hours hand building a machine and then handing it off to another team that then spent another 4 hours doing the finer points of configuration of Adobe and stuff, down to IT team was spending less than 10 minutes a device. Most of that time was generating the asset sticker for the machine. And you know what, that's a good problem to have. However, going sort of back there, the problem that we then had was with the drop shipping of devices was, we initially tried to do the whole thing of, oh yeah, we're just going to send the thing out in the shrink wrap, and it'll be fine. And it wasn't. So people were skipping the internet somehow during the EDE process. And the solution to that was very simple, is that IT always gets the Mac first. We unboxed it, we put the asset sticker on it, we run it through the setup assistant, we let it sit on the Jamf Connect screen for a couple of minutes to be safe, we turn it off and we give it to the user. Either a new user with an onboarding form or an existing user for a device replacement. But keep your eyes on the next version of macOS. It's going to make that process a little bit easier. But, that's why we called it almost zero touch. So, how do we do? Well, we got more SATA, which is more better. We got more flexibility, which is definitely more better. But we also got more Wi-Fi, which is not more better. But even Nick Cage likes that one. So, that's happy. If Nick Cage is happy, we're happy. I don't know, with the Q&A.
Thank you so much. So we've got about 5.5 minutes for Q&A.
It's been 3 years of me telling you could do this. Remember, you did it. You did it.
You did it.
It's amazing what you can do with a pandemic motivating you.
Because we have so little time for Q&A, I did want to let you know that we're about to hold the world's largest brain date. So follow me Pied Piper style over to the brain date area, which is take a left, go down the end of the hall, and go outside. I have this scheduled for the next 45 minutes too, so if you'd like to ask questions, if you'd like to join, you're more than absolutely
I will do that.
And we can take probably 2 questions right now. Up, go one out there. Hold on the question until we get the mic on over to you.
Run, Israel, run.
Hey, Richard, thank you very much for this. This was awesome. So one of the problems that we have with our rollout, I'm at the University of Notre Dame, and we just started with Jamf Connect. When the help desk gets a request to change, we also have Okta, to change a forgotten password. So they do their change in Okta to a temporary password, but when Connect wants to resync, it asks them for the old password, which is the password they forgot.
Yeah.
Do you know if there's a way around that?
That depends entirely. So the question is, if someone has had a password change, what's a way of doing it through Jamf Connect without knowing what the old password is? And the short version for that is there's a couple of different ways. If the machine's got disk encryption enabled, you can use the file disk recovery key, and that's a method that we use in the vast proportion of our cases, because people who are in that situation are also locked out of their machines. The other way is IT techs with a local administrator account. Because they're just local accounts, you can manually reset the user's account to a different password, and then you let Jamf Connect do the sync, and you just tell them what the old password is. A couple of different ways depending on your circumstances.
The most important thing to remember is that Jamf Connect is not a password reset utility, and one must know one's local password to change one's local password. That's the important piece.
Yes.
What else we got? One more question. I think we're going to be good, and we'll head on over.
I don't know. There's somebody lights of eyes. I can't.
You got it? Izzy's got it. All right. There you go.
Thank you for your presentation. My question relates to disabling the check-in that you do at the beginning of the Dev Notified script.
Okay.
I've done that in the past, and I've had situations where maybe the script doesn't complete, something happens, network disconnection, something, that it never gets back to re-enabling the check-in. Do you have you encountered that? And if so, do you have any way that you've gotten around that?
The only time we ever had that is, sorry,
I think I actually know the answer on this one. So you know how you kill the
Yeah.
check-in? I think that another event trigger is happening, and it's interrupting the event trigger. Let's talk about that later. I think that you're killing the check-in process.
I kill the check-in process entirely, but I have had situations in the past where it didn't come back because I didn't have the code right and it went into production. A reboot fixes that.
I always test, but I always test in prod.
Yeah, exactly. No, they're always dealing with it, but that's why I deliberately put that code up in the slides, because I found that the older most CTL commands are not nearly as reliable as the new ones.
I'd be suspect too that there's maybe in another maybe profile configuration, there's a little box check somewhere in a different profile that's continually causing recurrent check-in of some kind.
Huge thank you to everyone who attended. A huge thank you to Rick. And enjoy the rest of your JNUC.